Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1950s contactee Orfeo Angelucci. The mystic on the assembly line, Orfeo Angelucci and the Cold War cosmic therapy session. While many 1950s contactees focused on the hardware of UFOs, the shiny chrome, the dramatic desert landings, and the aggressively grainy photographs, Orfeo Angelucci took a starkly different path. If George Adamski was the flamboyant ambassador of the movement, Angelucci was its existential theologian, taking a mundane Los Angeles commute and turning it into a full-blown cosmic therapy session. Angelucci's daily life was a masterclass in Cold War irony. He was an aircraft assembly line worker at Lockheed in Burbank, California, the beating heart of the American military-industrial complex. Every single day, he helped build the high-speed jets deployed to chase down those pesky flying discs making headlines. This meant Angelucci spent his shift assembling state-of-the-art weapons of war, while his soul wrestled with the looming apocalyptic dread of nuclear annihilation. Then came 1952. While driving home through exhaust-choked traffic, he wasn't greeted by an ominous military alert, but by a glowing disc-shaped object that initiated the most unbureaucratic communication imaginable. Instead of a simple "take me to your leader" briefing, Angelucci's encounters unfolded through a sophisticated, almost Gnostic hierarchy that split the universe into two unforgettable acts. Imagine an infinite, non-localized, cosmic sounding board that bypassed earthly languages entirely. The voice didn't meet him in a diner or a canyon. It was an ambient, omniscient intelligence that delivered a sweeping, God's-eye view of history. It reframed the terrifying atomic anxieties of the 1950s, not as a tragic error, but as a grueling soul-schooling experience. In short, the universe was treating humanity like a stressed-out high schooler cramming for an existential final exam. If the voice was the terrifyingly vast, abstract CEO of the cosmos, Orion was the approachable human resources manager. As a pilot of the disc-shaped craft, Orion was intensely, almost startlingly human. He acted as a patient mentor, translating deep metaphysical truths into a form a tired factory worker could digest. Orion proved that you could master advanced starfaring technology while keeping your celestial chill entirely intact. Rebranding the saucer from military threat to divine grace. Angelucci's 1955 book, The Secret of the Saucers, completely blew up the prevailing Cold War paradigm of ufology. Back then, everyone was terrified the discs belonged to the Soviets or hostile space invaders. Angelucci flipped the script entirely. He argued that the saucers weren't crude vehicles running on internal combustion or rocket fuel. They were physical manifestations of higher consciousness. The real question wasn't how do they fly, but why are they staring at us? Rather than worrying about geopolitical treaties or disarmament, Angelucci diagnosed humanity's core issue as a bad case of spiritual blindness. The nuclear arms race and the Red Menace were just symptoms of a species throwing a global tantrum because our technological brilliance had drastically outpaced our spiritual maturity. For an atomic age public terrified of mushroom clouds, Angelucci offered a radical lifeline of optimism. He suggested we weren't being eyed by hostile invaders, but by a future version of ourselves, kind of like a cosmic older sibling watching us fumble with matches near a gasoline pump, hoping we'd figure out how to put them down before we burn the whole house to the ground. By blending Christian mysticism with space-age tech, Angelucci accidentally wrote the foundational holy text for the 1960s peace movement, proving that when the world is on the brink of self-destruction, sometimes you don't need a missile defense system. You just need a good heart-to-heart with an alien named Orion during rush hour traffic. If Orfeo Angelucci's 1955 classic, The Secret of the Saucers, proves anything, it's that working the assembly line at a defense plant can really make a guy look for higher meaning. While his fellow contactees were busy counting rivets on scout ships or hosting awkward coffee clutches in the Mojave Desert, Angelucci decided to casually turn ufology into a full-blown, Christ-infused theological masterpiece. He didn't just see extraterrestrials, he looked out at the cosmos and realized he was chatting with the administrative staff of the divine. Angelucci threw out the standard nuts and bolts mechanical checklist entirely. Instead of viewing the visitors as biological neighbors dropping by in a Buick from Mars, he reframed them as senior spiritual executives. These space brothers were humanity's older, vastly wiser siblings. Having somehow survived their own awkward, high-explosive atomic adolescence eons ago, they had finally figured out how to sync their Wi-Fi with the fundamental laws of divine love and creative order. Rather than hovering just to gawk at our bad driving, they were acting as active, sweat-suited custodians of Earth's spiritual trajectory, subtly intervening so the human seed didn't accidentally blow up the entire planetary greenhouse before graduation day. Suddenly, Flying Saucer wasn't just a mysterious aircraft. It was a divine rescue vehicle sent to pull humanity back from the edge. Angelucci also pioneered the ultimate hot take on quantum mechanics by viewing physics entirely through a moral lens. He posited that the universe is locked in an eternal, high-stakes tug-of-war between evolution, light, and entropy, darkness. To Angelucci, splitting the atom wasn't a crowning scientific triumph. It was a toddler accidentally finding the keys to a chainsaw. Mastering nuclear energy without first figuring out basic spiritual self-control was, in his view, an act of premeditated spiritual suicide. The real danger of a nuclear war wasn't just that it would turn the planet into a radioactive cinder block. It was that it risked permanently severing the human spirit from the creative pulse of the universe. When the Space Brothers showed up screaming about nuclear disarmament, they weren't trying to meddle in Cold War politics . They were running a desperate intervention for the human soul. To convince a skeptical public that Earth's current dumpster fire state of war and greed wasn't an immutable law of nature, Angelucci claimed he was routinely taken on interplanetary field trips. These weren't your standard budget airline flights with stale peanuts. Instead, they were profound bouts of astral projection and missing time, where his consciousness was ripped right out of his tired Lockheed uniform and shipped off to harmonious societies operating in higher dimensions. During these cosmic tours, he got to rub elbows with civilizations that had actually managed to combine high-tech machinery with high-level spiritual wisdom. He returned to his clock-punching job in Burbank with a radical epiphany. He wasn't just a cog in the military-industrial complex. He was a time-tested cosmic traveler who had seen the blueprint of what humanity could become if we'd all just take a deep breath and put down the plutonium. By blending Christian eschatology with high-strangeness extraterrestrial contact, Angelucci single-handedly gave the contactee movement its first real Sunday school syllabus. He yanked ufology out of the grim paranoid trenches of the Cold War and handed humanity a glowing cosmic flashlight of hope. For an entire generation of Americans living in active terror of the mushroom cloud, Orfeo Angelucci's message was the ultimate psychological life raft. He taught a terrified public that they weren't just cosmic orphans bouncing around a cold, hostile universe. Instead, we were the beloved children of a grander, loving order, being closely watched by space brothers who were simply waiting for us to choose the light over total entropy. In doing so, he laid the spiritual foundation for the entire New Age movement decades before anyone even knew what a crystal grid was. In the 1950s, dominant American narrative around the skies was governed by pure, unadulterated panic. The Cold War was solidifying into a permanent state of dread. Radar nets spanned the Arctic, duck and cover drills traumatized elementary schoolers, and the aerospace sector worked 24/7 to crank out supersonic interceptors. By clocking in every day at the Lockheed plant in Burbank, California, Orfeo Angelucci was an active, wrench-turning participant in this military-industrial engine. Yet, while his coworkers riveted wings designed to hunt Soviet bombers, Angelucci formulated a radical philosophical counterweight. The true battlefield wasn't the airspace over the polar ice caps. It was right inside the human psyche. A central pillar of Angelucci's narrative was humanity as a developing spiritual organism, a literal seed of divine potential trying to sprout through concrete. While many early contactees claimed benevolent aliens were about to land on Mars to fix Earth's geopolitical blunders, Angelucci forcefully pushed back against this cosmic savior complex. In his writings, the visitors made it crystal clear. They were not going to intervene to dismantle our nuclear stockpiles or overthrow corrupt governments. Doing so would completely rob humanity of its evolutionary growing pains. The craft and their crews weren't invaders or babysitters. They were high-frequency mirrors. When Angelucci looked at Orion, he wasn't seeing an alien overlord. He was staring at a future version of terrestrial humanity. A glowing preview of what we could achieve if we successfully navigated our awkward technological adolescence without blowing ourselves back to the Stone Age. The Cold War was just a cosmic aptitude test. Either level up our spiritual maturity to match our nuclear toys or succumb to total entropy. The visitors were just holding a flashlight at the crossroads, leaving us to figure out the directions. Decades before the Human Potential Movement N-channel tapes exploded across the late 1960s and 70s, Angelucci was already dropping their exact vocabulary in The Secret of the Saucers. 1955. The idea that all minds are nodes in a single, infinite living fabric. The realization that physical distance and planetary origin are trivial compared to shared spiritual ancestry. The concept that moral and spiritual elevation literally alters the energetic density of a being and its environment. By recasting the phenomenon this way, Angelucci quietly executed one of the most subversive cultural judo moves of the 20th century. Where the military saw the enemy as Soviet bombers, radioactive fallout, and unknown radar bogies, Angelucci identified the true threat as spiritual stagnation, hatred, and the illusion of separation. Where the Pentagon sought solutions in faster jets and bigger warheads, Angelucci insisted the only viable fix was personal purification and choosing love over fear. He took the flying saucer straight out of the Air Force's panic room radar scope and handed it directly to the mystics. He proved you could spend your day tightening bolts on a jet engine while spending your night single-handedly dismantling the psychological architecture of war itself. Angelucci eventually paid a heavy price for his public claims, suffering professional burnout and isolation as the nuts and bolts ufology community rolled their eyes at his non-mechanical narrative. Yet his influence remains absolute. By stripping away the geopolitical panic and replacing it with a message of spiritual transcendence, Angelucci wrote the manual for modern spiritual ufology. He permanently shifted the conversation from "where are they from?" to "why are they staring at our souls?" In the long, wonderfully weird history of contactees, Orfeo Angelucci remains the patron saint of those who looked up at the flying saucers and didn't see an incoming national security threat, but rather a beacon of hope shining brightly in a cold, atomic, and thoroughly stressed-out world. When you step back and contrast the contactee landscape of the 1950s with where we stand today, the shift in our collective mindset is nothing short of whiplash-inducing. Back in the mid-20th century, the cultural worldview was built entirely on air raid bunker paranoia. Humanity was huddled under school desks during duck and cover drills, obsessing over radar screens for Soviet bombers, and staring at the atomic clock with white knuckles. In that era, the UFO narrative reflected our collective anxiety. The flying saucers were viewed primarily through a cold, military-industrial lens as potential airborne hostiles, technological unknowns, or threats to national airspace. Fast forward to today, and our cosmic focus point has undergone a complete metaphysical plot twist. Instead of trembling over geopolitical red menaces, modern ufology and the contemporary consciousness movement look up at the skies and down into our secret nuclear reservations, seeking spiritual evolution, interdimensional physics, and existential answers. We've pivoted from asking, are those Soviet stealth disks or alien war machines, to wondering, are these non-human intelligences cosmic babysitters keeping us from blowing up the block, or is our atomic technology acting as an interstellar beacon? Orfeo Angelucci and his mid-century contemporaries traded the Pentagon's radar scope for a mirror of the human soul. They taught us that the real battle isn't fought with supersonic interceptors over the polar ice caps, but with our own spiritual maturity. So, in the grand, chaotic sitcom of the universe, the contrast is clear. The 1950s public was terrified the neighbors were going to burn down the house with a Molotov cocktail. Today, we're realizing the neighbors are just standing on the perimeter fence, watching us stare blankly at a box of matches, desperately hoping we figure out how to put them down before we order room service from the void. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.